I was standing in my doorway when Tasha walked up the porch steps carrying a cardboard box. She hadn't called, hadn't texted, 6 months of nothing, and now here she was, telling me she came to pick up a few things she left behind. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I got a word out, a hand slipped through the crook of my elbow and squeezed. Jenna, the girl from the other side of the duplex wall, leaned into my shoulder, looked Tasha dead in the eye, and smiled. "Hey babe, who's this?" she said, soft and easy, like she'd said it 1,000 times before. Tasha's face went still, and between the three of us, sitting on the edge of the porch step in the late afternoon sun, was a small basil plant in a clay pot, the same one that had been there since the day I moved in. But I need to back up. My name is Darren Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a licensed electrician working commercial jobs around Durham, North Carolina. I pull wire, run conduit, troubleshoot panels that haven't been serviced since the 90s. It's not glamorous, but it's honest, and I'm good at it. My days start at 5 in the morning. Black coffee, no sugar. I drive my old pickup to whichever site needs me, put in my hours, come home, shower, and sit on the porch with a book or some music until the sky goes dark. That's been my life since January of this year, when I moved into the duplex after Tasha and I ended things. Tasha Grant. 2 years together. She talked, I listened. She liked going out, I liked staying in. For a while that worked. Then it stopped. She said she needed space. I gave it to her. Found out later that space had a name and an address. I didn't chase her. Didn't call. I packed what was mine, signed a lease on a duplex across town, and started over. I still had a small box of her things in the closet, a couple paperbacks, an old charger, a scarf. I kept it because I didn't know what else to do with it. Ray, the guy I work with every day on the job site, was the only one who knew the whole story. Ray's the kind of friend who doesn't push, but doesn't pretend, either. He'll sit with you in the hard parts without trying to fix them, which is rare and worth more than most people realize. Every lunch break we'd sit on the tailgate eating sandwiches, and he'd ask the same question. "How you doing, D?" And I'd say the same thing. "I'm good." He'd look at me the way a man looks at another man, when he knows good isn't the right word but respects you enough not to say so. Then he'd nod and let the quiet do the talking. The day I moved in, I carried the last box up the porch steps and found a small clay pot with a basil plant sitting by the front door. Barely a few inches tall, soil still damp. There was a piece of paper tucked under the rim, handwritten, the letters leaning right like whoever wrote it was nervous. It said, "Welcome. Water it on Sundays." No name. No signature. The next morning, the girl from the other side knocked. Jenna Cooper, 27, hands still covered in cat hair. She worked as a vet tech at the clinic down the road. She asked to borrow a pair of pliers. I handed them over. She smiled, quiet, more in her eyes than on her mouth, said, "Thanks, neighbor," and went back to her side. Jenna was beautiful in a way that didn't announce itself. She had this presence, calm and steady, the kind of thing you notice because it's warm, not because it's loud. I'd see her on her side of the porch late at night, hair down around her shoulders, drinking tea alone. I'd nod. She'd nod back. The duplex walls were thin. That first month, Tasha called me several times, late at night, wanting to argue, blame me for not fighting harder. I kept my voice flat, said what needed saying, hung up. Thin walls meant Jenna heard. Not every word, but enough to know the tone of a woman making demands, and the sound of a man trying to hold it together. I didn't hate Tasha. I just didn't have the energy to be angry. Some relationships don't end with a slam. They end with a click, and that click echoes louder than any slam ever could. I watered the basil every Sunday, just like the note said. I didn't know why I listened to someone I'd never met. Maybe because it had been a long time since anyone asked something of me without wanting something in return. Over the next few weeks, Jenna showed up more. She knocked to ask about the recycling schedule, brought over brownies she'd made too many of, needed a flashlight for a fuse. Every reason was perfectly reasonable. Every visit was perfectly short. I didn't think twice, because why would I? She was my neighbor. That's what good neighbors do. But I'm telling you this story from the other side of it now. I know everything. And looking back, every one of those knocks was one reason wrapped around another reason, the real one she never said out loud. One Wednesday evening, Jenna knocked and said the lamp on her kitchen counter wasn't working. I walked over, checked it, and found the plug had just come loose from the outlet. Pushed it back in. The lamp clicked on. Took me 2 minutes. But Jenna had already set out 2 mugs of coffee before she came to get me. She'd made them first. I sat at her kitchen table and we talked for 15 minutes about nothing important, the long day she'd had at the clinic, a stray kitten someone dropped off in a shoebox, the heat that summer. When I stood to leave, she said, "Thanks, Darren. I really don't know anything about electrical stuff." Her voice was easy, grateful. I believed every word of it. Shouldn't have. You see, what I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn for months, was that Jenna had unplugged that lamp herself before she knocked on my door. She pulled the cord clean out of the wall, walked over, and asked the electrician next door to come fix it. She told me this later, and when she did, I laughed so hard I had to sit down. But right then, sitting in her kitchen drinking coffee she'd brewed before she even came to get me, I didn't have a clue. She was good at this. Not at lying, because it wasn't really a lie. It was more like building a door and then asking me to walk through it. And I walked through every single time without looking at the hinges. I want to tell you what it felt like, those weeks after the lamp. Something changed in the rhythm of my days, so gradual I almost missed it. I started noticing small things. The sound of Jenna's car pulling in after her shift. The particular way she closed her screen door, gentle, like she was trying not to disturb someone. The faint smell of whatever she was cooking drifting through the wall around 7 in the evening. None of it meant anything by itself. But together it started to feel like a pattern, a kind of background music I didn't realize I'd been listening to until it was already part of my day. One night it rained hard. The kind of Durham summer rain that turns gutters into streams and makes the whole street smell like warm concrete. I was sitting on my side of the porch with a beer, just listening. I heard Jenna's screen door creak open. She stood there a moment, looking at the rain, then turned and looked at me. She hesitated for about half a breath. Then she walked over and sat down next to me. Didn't say a word. Neither did I. We sat there 15 minutes, shoulder to shoulder, a few inches apart, listening to rain hit the tin overhang above us. I could feel the warmth coming off her arm near mine. I could smell the wet concrete, and underneath it, something softer, like chamomile and clean laundry. Then she stood up. "Good night, Darren." Went inside. Her door clicked shut and I sat there a while longer, beer going warm in my hand, listening to the rain thin out and the street go quiet. I wasn't sure what I was feeling. I just knew it was something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Something that had nothing to do with loneliness and everything to do with the opposite of it. The strange warmth of choosing to be quiet next to someone who doesn't need you to talk. Then there were the Sundays. One week I forgot to water the basil. Came out that afternoon and the soil was already damp. The next Sunday I forgot again. Damp again. Jenna was watering it on the weeks I missed. Never mentioned it. Never claimed credit. I never asked. But something shifted in my chest, this quiet pull, like a thread drawn tight. Thin enough to snap if I tugged too hard. So I left it alone. At the job site one lunch, I told Ray my neighbor kept bringing food over. He chewed his sandwich, looked at me sideways, and said, "Man, you are slow." I asked what he meant. He shook his head. Didn't explain. Here's the part one didn't learn until later. After everything came out, Jenna told me what she'd said to her best friend at the clinic, months before any of this broke open. She said, "He waters the basil plant every Sunday. A plant that isn't his, from a note nobody signed, and he still waters it every single week. The kind of person who treats a plant like that, I want to know how they treat a person." She liked me, had liked me for months, and I was the last person on earth to figure it out. One Saturday, I was out front fixing the wooden fence between our yards. A plank had cracked and was leaning loose. I had my tools out, measuring, cutting, nailing. Jenna came outside, leaned on the railing, handed me a glass of water without me asking. We talked while I worked, easy stuff. The neighborhood, the old man 2 houses down who played jazz records on Friday nights. When I nailed the last board, the hammer slipped and my hand jerked sideways. Before I could pull back, Jenna caught my wrist. Quick, firm, then she let go just as fast, like she surprised herself. But the warmth from her fingers stayed on my skin the rest of that afternoon, like a print that wouldn't fade. There was another night, a bad one for her. She knocked around 9, I was a little red, not from crying so much as from holding it in. She worked at an animal clinic. Some days the animals don't make it. She didn't explain, just said, "You got a beer?" I handed her one. She sat on my porch step and drank it slow, staring at the dark street. I sat next to her, Didn't ask a single question. When the bottle was empty, she set it down and said, "Thanks for not asking," and went home. That's how trust is built. Not in the grand gestures. In the quiet ones where you could push, but you choose not to. Where you let the silence do what silence does best, which is make someone feel safe enough to come back. Around that time, I started cooking more food than I needed. I made enough spaghetti for 3 people on a Tuesday night. Grilled 4 chicken breasts when I only eat 2. Told myself it was meal prep. It wasn't. I was hoping she'd knock on the door and I'd have a reason to say, "Hey, I made too much. You want a plate?" I was learning her move, using her own playbook without even knowing it. Making extra food so I'd have an excuse to be near her. The same way she made extra brownies. The same way she needed a flashlight she probably had somewhere in a drawer. We were both building doors for each other. I just didn't see it yet. There was one more moment, small, but it stayed with me. I was on the porch reading one evening, and Jenna came outside with her cat. The cat wandered over to my side, jumped onto the step beside me, and settled down like it belonged there. Jenna walked over to get him and stood next to my chair for a moment, looking down at the page I was reading. She didn't say anything about the book. She said, "That's a good spot. The light's better on your side." Then she picked up the cat and went home. But the way she said it, quiet and almost to herself, I can still hear it. She wasn't talking about the light. I just didn't know that yet. Every sign was right there. On the plant she watered without telling me. On the chair she held steady while I stood on it. In 15 minutes of rain with nothing said. In a lamp she unplugged with her own hands. I was too busy looking behind me to see the person standing right beside me. Now let me take you back to that porch. The day it all changed. I'd just gotten home from the site. Still in my work clothes, boots dusty. I was unlocking the front door when I heard heels on the concrete walkway. Tasha came up the steps with a cardboard box. I could tell it was almost empty by the way she held it. One-handed, no weight to it. She was dressed up, makeup careful, earrings on. She didn't look like someone who came to collect a few old books. Before I could speak, I heard Jenna's door open on the other side. She was just getting back from the clinic, bag over her shoulder, keys in hand. She saw Tasha, and something crossed her face, quick and sharp, like a cloud moving over the sun. She'd never met Tasha, but 6 months of thin walls had taught her that voice, those late-night calls, that tone. She knew exactly who was standing on my porch. And then Jenna did the most impulsive thing she'd ever done. She dropped her bag, walked straight to me, slipped her arm through mine, leaned into my shoulder, and looked at Tasha with a smile so natural, so warm, so completely believable that even I almost bought it. "Hey babe, who's this?" Tasha's face froze. 3 full seconds. Then she adjusted. She was always quick with that. "Oh, that's new." Jenna held the act for about 2 minutes, rested her head on my shoulder, called me babe one more time, asked Tasha if she wanted water. Flawless. Then she squeezed my arm, said, "I'll let you two talk," and stepped back. As she let go, her fingers trailed across the back of my hand. Light enough to be accidental. It was not accidental. Tasha stayed. Who is she? How long? I told her the truth. Just my neighbor. Nothing going on. She gave me the look. The one that says she understands things I can't. Neighbors don't hold on to a man like that, Darren. I gave her the box from the closet. Paperbacks, charger, scarf. She turned it over in her hands. "You kept this for 6 months?" Her voice went soft, as if the box proved I still cared. It didn't. I just hadn't bothered to throw it out. A few days later, Tasha came back. Said she'd forgotten something. There was nothing to forget. Jenna wasn't home. Tasha sat on the porch, drank the water I offered, and then she said it. Calm. Rehearsed. "You know your neighbor has a thing for you, right?" I said I didn't think so. "Darren, she brings you brownies. She invents reasons to knock on your door. She waters your plant when you forget. You think that's friendly? She's playing a part, and you're the audience. She wants something from you." Every word was true. Jenna did like me. She did find reasons to be near me. But Tasha took the truth and held it up to a different light. One that turned sincerity into calculation and affection into a scheme. She didn't lie. She did something worse. She told a true thing the wrong way. That's the most dangerous thing a person can do. Because when the right person bends the truth just enough, it cuts deeper than any lie. Her reason was simple. Tasha wanted back in. Jenna was in the way. So she reframed honest feelings as manipulation to make me doubt the one person who'd been real with me from the start. And it worked. Not because I believed Tasha over Jenna. Not exactly. It worked because it planted a seed of doubt in the only soil it needed to grow, which was the part of me that was still bruised from the last time I trusted someone. Tasha knew that part of me better than anyone. She'd been the one who put the bruise there. I pulled back, stopped sitting on the porch at night, stopped cooking extra. When Jenna knocked with a plate of food, I took it at the door, said thank you, and closed the door before she could step inside. The first time I did it, I saw something pass across her face. Not hurt exactly, but recognition. She knew something had changed. She just didn't know what. She didn't push. That's the thing about Jenna that I didn't appreciate enough at the time. She didn't demand an explanation. She didn't show up at my door asking what was wrong, or what she did, or why I was being different. She just stepped back and gave me whatever space I seemed to need, even though I wasn't really asking for space. I was just scared, and she absorbed that fear like it was her job, took the weight of my uncertainty, and carried it without complaint, which is something nobody should have to do. The basil plant started to yellow. I forgot to water it one Sunday, then another, and this time Jenna didn't fill in for me. She respected the boundary I set, even when the boundary was wrong. Even with the plant, she would rather let it dry out than cross a line I drew, because that's the kind of person she is. The leaves curled inward. The soil cracked in the pot. The porch, which had started to feel like the warmest place in the world, felt emptier than it had in months. I'd sit inside, hear the silence through the wall, and know I'd done that. I just didn't know how to undo it. Tasha came back a third time. Dropped the pretense. She wanted to try again. The man she left me for was done. You're the only person who ever really treated me right, Darren, she said. But while she said it, her eyes drifted around my living room. The new TV, the bookshelf I built, the couch, the rug. Her mouth said she missed me. Her eyes were running inventory. She said I was the only one, but her eyes were pricing the room. And in that moment, I saw something clearly for the first time. Tasha didn't miss me. She missed the version of me that said yes to everything. The version that absorbed her moods and her silences and her disappearances and called it devotion. She missed being comfortable. And comfort and love look alike from the outside, but they're not the same thing, not even close. I used to believe love was endurance, that whoever lasted longer and kept quieter loved harder. 6 months of silence taught me different. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is the space where you finally hear your own voice. And my voice was saying, clearly and without hesitation, this is not love. This was never love. And you know it. Next day, lunch on the tailgate. I told Ray everything. He listened all the way through without interrupting. Put his sandwich down, wiped his hands, looked me dead in the face. You know what your problem is, D? You're scared that someone being good to you might be real. Because the last person who was supposed to be good to you wasn't. But you're punishing the wrong person. He picked his sandwich back up and took another bite. Didn't add a single word. Didn't need to. The man said what he said, and it sat in my chest the rest of the day like a stone I couldn't swallow and couldn't spit out. I kept hearing it while I was pulling wire that afternoon. Punishing the wrong person. I thought about the brownies she'd brought over that I'd taken at the door without a thank you. The silence through the wall where there used to be small sounds that made the place feel alive. The basil plant dying on the porch. He was right. I knew he was right. I just wasn't ready to do anything about it. Not yet. Sunday morning. Early. The light was barely coming through the trees when I stepped onto the porch and looked at the basil plant. The leaves had yellowed. The soil was cracked dry in the pot. But down at the base, where the stem met the dirt, there was still a thin line of green. It wasn't dead. It was waiting for someone to show up. I went inside, filled a glass with water, and poured it slow over the soil. I stood there at 7 in the morning, watering a small plant on a porch step, and I asked myself a question I should have asked weeks ago. Why was I letting Tasha's version of the truth decide how I saw Jenna? She said Jenna liked me. And what if she did? Since when did someone caring about you become something to be afraid of? I set the glass down and walked across the porch to Jenna's door. First time I had ever been the one to knock. She opened it, surprised. Coffee mug in her hand, cap between her ankles, morning light coming through the screen and catching the side of her face. I didn't rehearse anything. I just spoke. I'm sorry about the last few weeks. Tasha said some things, and I let them get to me. She went quiet. Then what did she say? She said you like me, that you make up reasons to come over. Jenna looked at me for a long time. Her hand moved to the doorframe and gripped it, knuckles going white. The cat rubbed against her ankle, and she didn't look down. She just held my gaze, steady, the way someone looks at you when they're about to set something heavy down. She's right. 2 words. No spin. No softening. I didn't bring brownies over because I made too many. I unplugged the lamp on my counter and then called you to come fix it. I watered the plant because I wanted to take care of something you touched every day. And I grabbed your arm that day in front of her because it was the only time I had a reason. I knew if I didn't hold on right then, I never would. The noise in my head, the voice that spent weeks saying be careful, don't trust this, keep the wall up, went completely quiet. Like a dial turned down to 0. I could smell the coffee from her kitchen. I could hear her cat purring behind her. The screen door between us had a small tear in the corner I'd been meaning to fix. You unplugged the lamp, I said, and then called the electrician to come plug it back in. She laughed. Her eyes got a little wet, but she was laughing. Yeah, that might be the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me. She laughed again louder. A real one. Not the quiet-eye smile she usually gave, but something full and surprised, like she couldn't believe this was how it was happening. I said, I'm not good at this, Jenna. I don't know the right words. But I don't want that plant to die anymore. And I don't think I'm talking about the plant. She understood. I understood. The door between us, the real one, not the screen door with the torn corner, but the one we'd both been standing on opposite sides of for months, had finally opened. And neither of us tried to rush through it. We just let it be open. We stood there in her doorway for a while. Neither of us moved to hug or kiss or do anything that would have made the moment feel bigger than it needed to be. She just lowered her hand from the doorframe, and I noticed the red marks her grip had left on her own fingers. She'd been holding on that hard, that long. I said, how about I make us breakfast? She said, your side or mine? I said, does it matter anymore? She smiled, the real one, the full one, and stepped aside to let me in. The cat followed like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. We ate scrambled eggs and toast at her small kitchen table, the one I'd sat at the night she asked me to fix the lamp. That lamp was on now, plugged in, glowing warm and steady. Everything in that kitchen looked the same as it had months ago, the same mugs, the same yellow dish towel hanging from the oven handle, the same cat purring under the table. But it all felt completely different, because I was different. I was sitting in the same chair, eating off the same plates. But this time I wasn't the neighbor she had to trick into coming over. I was just there because I wanted to be. And she knew it. After breakfast, I went out and watered the basil plant. The leaves were still yellow, but the green at the base looked a little brighter than yesterday. Could have been my imagination. Could have been the light. I don't think it was. Tasha came one last time. She walked up the porch steps on a Saturday morning and saw Jenna sitting in the chair next to mine. 2 coffee mugs between us, the morning going easy and unhurried, the basil plant freshly watered at our feet. There was no scene to make, no argument to have. I looked at Tasha and said what I should have said the very first time she walked up those steps. Your things are gone, Tasha, and I think you knew that from the beginning. She stood there for a breath, maybe 2. Something moved across her face, not anger, not sadness, more like the look a person gets when they finally realize that a door they've been trying to push open was never locked. It just leads somewhere they don't belong anymore. Then she turned and walked down the steps. The sound of her heels on the concrete walkway got softer and softer until it disappeared entirely. Just like that. No slam. Just a click. The way that story was always supposed to end. We didn't rush into anything. There was no fancy dinner, no official declaration, no big moment where the music swells and someone says the perfect line. What happened was simpler. The door between our 2 sides of the duplex just stopped closing. Jenna cooked. I washed the dishes. I hung the bookshelf she'd wanted in her hallway. She left a cup of black coffee on my counter at 4:30 every morning before I was even out of the shower. The basil plant on the porch, we just watered it together now. No schedule, no keeping track. Whoever walked past it first just did it. People asked when we made it official. I never had a good answer. There wasn't a moment when a switch flipped. It was like the sky getting light. You don't see the exact second the sun breaks the horizon. But by the time you look up, everything around you is bright, and you realize it's been that way for a while. 3 months in, Jenna still technically lived on her side of the duplex, but my house key had migrated into her jacket pocket, and her coffee mug had taken up permanent residence in my kitchen cabinet, The blue one with the chipped handle that she refused to throw away because she said things with flaws last longer. We cooked together 4 nights a week, sometimes 5. She knew I drank my coffee black. I knew she hummed while she washed dishes, always the same song, some folk thing I never asked the name of because I liked the mystery of it. I knew she read 2 books at a time and dog-eared the pages, which would have driven me crazy with anyone else, but somehow didn't with her. I learned she was afraid of thunderstorms. Every time one rolled through Durham, rattling the windows and shaking the tin roof, she'd knock on my door with a blanket already tucked under her arm, sit down on the couch without saying a word about why she was there, and I'd put something quiet on the TV until the sky settled down. She never said she was scared. She didn't have to, and I never said I was glad she came over. I didn't have to either. Ray met her at a Saturday cookout I threw. I watched them from across the yard, talking for a good 5 minutes, both of them laughing at something I couldn't hear. I didn't know what they were saying, but I knew it was good, because Ray doesn't laugh like that with people he doesn't trust. That night, he sent me one text message. Hold on to that one, D. 6 months in. Summer came down on Durham the way it always does, thick and heavy and slow, the kind of heat that sits on your shoulders and doesn't move until October tells it to. The basil plant had grown into a full bush, thick and green, and Jenna started cutting from it to cook with. She'd pinch off a handful of leaves and drop them into a salad or tear them over pasta, and the kitchen filled with the smell of something growing. I built a wooden shelf along the porch railing for more plants. She filled it in a week. Rosemary, thyme, 2 kinds of mint. Our porch looked like a garden, and I didn't mind one bit. We never said I love you. Not in those 3 words. I think we were both afraid that saying it out loud would somehow change what it was, make it smaller by pinning it to language. So instead we said it other ways. Every morning before I left for the site, she put her hand flat on my chest, right over my heart, and held it there for a second. I'd lean down and kiss her forehead. That was our version. It was better than the words. Anyone walking past would have known exactly what they were seeing. She said it in other ways. In the hand on my chest at 5 in the morning when the house was still dark. In the plant she never stopped watering, not once, rain or shine or the dead middle of winter. In a kitchen lamp she quietly unplugged with her own hands just to have a reason to knock on my door and sit across from me. Some people say love out loud. Jenna said it with a power cord and basil leaves. And I heard her clear as day. One year, fall came back around to Durham. The leaves turned gold and rust along the streets. The air finally cooled enough to sit outside without sweating through your shirt, and the light took on that soft amber quality that makes everything look like a photograph of somewhere you never want to leave. You could smell wood smoke from somewhere in the neighborhood, and the evenings came earlier, which meant more time on the porch with the string lights Jenna had hung along the railing in August. The ones she said made the place look like it was waiting for something good to happen. Jenna moved in officially, though all that really meant was we stopped pretending there were 2 separate apartments. She brought her cat, her books, her collection of mismatched mugs, and a winter coat she said she'd had since college and refused to replace. I cleared closet space and emptied a dresser drawer. She filled both in about an hour and then found a 3rd drawer I didn't know I had. The original basil plant, the small one from that very first day, still sat on the porch next to the front door, surrounded now by 4 new pots she'd added over the months. That little plant had survived a whole winter. It went yellow once in January, drooped so low I was sure it was done, and then came back green in March like it had never been anywhere. Just like us. While we were moving her things in, I found the note. The original one. Welcome. Water it on Sundays. Pressed between the pages of a paperback she was halfway through, tucked in carefully like a bookmark. The edges were soft with age, the ink faded but still readable. She had kept it this whole time. From the very first day, I held it up and looked at her. She looked back at me with those eyes that always carried more than her words did. You watered it every Sunday, she said. A plant that wasn't yours, from a note nobody signed, and you still watered it every single week. That's when I knew. Knew what? She smiled. Quiet. The way she always smiled, more in her eyes than anywhere else. That you were the kind of person who stays. If you'd asked me a year ago what love was, I would have told you I didn't know anymore. Tasha taught me that love was endurance, that whoever held on longer and suffered more quietly loved harder. Jenna taught me the opposite. Love isn't endurance. Love is a plant someone leaves on your doorstep without signing their name, and you water it every Sunday without ever asking why. It's not about who can take the most. It's about who shows up quietly and keeps showing up, even when no one is watching and no one is keeping score. Tasha came back because she lost something comfortable. Jenna stayed because she found something real. Some people walk into your life and walk right back out when the next option comes along. And some people live on the other side of a thin wall and wait, patient and steady and unhurried, until you're finally ready to open the door. The basil plant is still there, right on the porch, next to the front door, exactly where it's always been. It's a lot bigger now than it was that first day. The pot can barely hold it anymore, roots pushing against clay, leaves reaching past the rim. We'll need to replant it soon, somewhere with more room to grow, more space to become whatever it's going to become next. Just like us. Have you ever missed someone who was standing right next to you the whole time? And if someone left a plant on your doorstep with no name on the note, would you water it? If this story hit you somewhere real, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment below. Tell me your story. I read every single one.